Across the Aeons is the second full-length album from Astralborne. This is a Toledo, Ohio-based melodic death metal band, and I think decidedly just melodic death metal. That's very much their focus, and their influences come very directly from the late 90s. And I don't mean just the Gothenburg sound, although that is the most prominent influence here. But they've got some classic heavy metal influences. This is very much a heavy metal record in most respects, an indulgent one, which also takes a lot of influence from sort of surface level at the gate isms. There's a little bit of, they cite, I think, death, late 90s death as one of their influences. So they go out there with it, but they pretty much just hook into the Scandinavian death metal element and really don't stray far from that in terms of how the whole album feels. In fact, if you were to, I don't know if it's fair to do so, but if you compare this to the general feeling of the most recent Majesty's record, they really are pulling from the same impetus, but this is a band that have more interest and connection in what came after the mid 90s, and this is very much like a late 90s feeling record in most respects. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because the first record from the band, Eternity's End, was much more of that. It had a little bit of the dialed down sound. It was a little bit more mid-range heavy in terms of the full mix, and it buried a little bit of the bass guitar, and it was less of an impactful record than it was a very traditional sounding record if we look back to a certain era where I guess I was a teenager at the time when that stuff was releasing, so it sticks in mind more readily. And you can see a lot of these influences in their past bands. So I think In Flames, especially Just a Race era, is probably the most important reference to make if you haven't heard any of the band's songs. But we're going to fix that right now and listen to a song right now. So while In Flames and maybe the past bands from these guys like Forever Lost are a big part of what makes this record sound the way it does, I would say that Dark Tranquillity fans will really enjoy this record as well. I don't really touch upon that in this record or the review, but the more I listened to it after the review and I thought about like what else I could have mentioned, I think that particularly late 90s, early 2000s Dark Tranquillity makes a bit of sense, even if there aren't a ton of those same types of leads in here. So really, this is an album of dual guitar harmony, or just harmonies in general. The interplay of the dual rhythm guitars is not the main focus. It is a lot on the melodic values of these songs, and there's quite a lot to it. This is almost a full hour of music, and one that I think they basically resolved to complete the thought as much as possible, and they might have even had more songs, I'm not sure, but this definitely feels like the excess of the late 90s. It feels like it's framed after an album like Colony, almost, where there's just too much of it, and they even include they include an In Flames cover in the middle of the record. It's kind of like, not only is it like a little bit bold to do, because, it's a little tongue-in-cheek. It's sort of like, well, here's exactly what we sound like, and here's a great cover that fits into the album so well that I didn't recognize the song. Not that I'm not familiar with that particular cover. It's just that it was surprising that it fit so well in their sound, and yeah, I don't know. I was impressed by that, and anyway, really, the thing here is that if you're a fan of melodic death metal, you'll probably appreciate this sound. The vocals are a little bit flat. They're just a little bit forceful, a little bit low, a little bit too layered. It just sounds like modern melodic metal mush, and it doesn't really retain enough of a personality to stand out. But if you're aiming for the lowest common denominator, I think that you could see this record on Century Media just as well, just because it meets that baseline of like, I listen to Insomnium or whatever, and this is also a thing that reminds me of that from when I was a kid. So that's not really a critique of the vocals so much as the overall, like, very loud sound of the record, the very bass-heavy production. This is like that step from the late 90s to the 2000s, where the fidelity of this type of music rose, the songwriting quality rose, and there was nowhere to go with it because the public had moved on from the trend. And so we got a lot of really great songwriters putting into a lot of melodic death metal that was a lot more personal and a lot more commercial. So in a lot of respects, the appeal here is nostalgia for me. And not that I'm yearning to be back in those times, because this is a very strong reproduction of that feeling, which they've managed to fit their own themes, their own thoughts, and their own vision into. And I think that they're probably having fun doing it based on any video that I saw surrounding the making of the album. It seems like they had a great time making it. It seems like this stuff both means a lot to them, but it's also a challenge to them. And it seems like they're engaged with it for the right reasons. So to me, that just kind of appeals in general. And at the end of the day, it's just about like this is a memorable melodic death metal album with a great album art, and it checks a lot of those boxes that are important to the point where it has a little bit of a soul, but also it just it's fun to listen to, and it has a lot of memorable songs. It's certainly the 9 minute title track is totally unnecessary. It's just ridiculously long and slow, and it's just a terrible way to end the album. But I still enjoyed sitting with it. So I had mixed thoughts on it before, but the more I listened to it, it was just, you know, I'm not going to shoot down a high quality melodic death metal record, and this is certainly one of them. So that'll be out about the end of the week, and you can read the review now on the site.